This is Platemark. My name is Ann Shafer, and I am your host. Today, we have a special treat for you in our History of Prints series. Today, you're going to hear True and I pull apart and talk about all of the ways in which one looks at a work of art, focused on one specific work of art. We'll run through composition and color and form and space and light and all of those things that we have alluded to over the series, but have never really pulled apart. So I hope you'll enjoy that. All right, let's buckle up and here we go. Hey everybody, it's Ann. I'm here with
True.
Yes, my partner in crime and our resident SME.
Sometimes.
You are.
On anything that's world related or finance related or social graces related, it's you're the SME.
Well, yeah, okay.
I'm just that humble little comical sidekick from the Midwest.
Hey. So we're doing something a little different today.
Yeah.
We're not prepared for our next.
That's not it. It's not prepared. We're starting on a new thought process because I've been thinking about how on Friday evenings some classical stations have a favorite call in and you say, I want to hear Lux Aeterna by so-and-so. And they'll play it. And eventually, if you do it enough, they'll say, well, this comes from Professor Claude Welch at SUNY Buffalo, who's obviously a sustaining contributor to our local NPR station. And then they'll put his stuff right there in the top of the playlist for the on-demand classical radio station, which I think is very cool. And that's because he calls in and the announcer knows who he is, and he always chooses great stuff that's not the same old war horses and blah, blah, blah. So I was thinking, because each of these episodes, Anne can talk to the world, to anybody, including someone on the subway, much to Ben's complete and utter dismay. I think it's hilarious because I'm right there with you. But because Anne can interview all sorts of people, but I can't come up with enough history of prints, HoP for you in the know, kinds of concepts, as often as we would like. I'm thinking that we could start this process of talking about one specific image. And I thought maybe what we could do so that I can get back in shape for the school year, because it's a week away and holy mother of God, I have to turn into this other person, hold a room for 3 hours, so-and-so. So when I start an art history course, and oftentimes consistently has been over at Peabody, Conservatory of Music, where they've never had visual art, or many of them haven't. Some have, and they're already brilliant. I always start them off with a sheet that I created many, many eons ago called Some Things to Consider When Discussing a Work of Art.
Well, and I'm going to interject. I think this all came up because, I love this idea, by the way, because one of our favorite listeners, Bob Benitez, wrote in that question about the golden mean and what did it mean? And I thought, well, maybe, we haven't really talked about composition. And then we started off on this, maybe we should go back and talk about all of the elements that make a good work of art.
And the other thing is that, Anne and I have some particular favorites over the years. Like the Milan was always a big hit. We didn't know it was going to turn into a whole episode all by itself. The fact that Anne was always shuffling prints so rapidly, and we had, of the 300 Rembrandt prints, the BMA had 280, and then Sophie's Choice. How do you choose which ones are going to be there? And I want to linger. And usually I'd have to see them upside down so the students could see them right side up on the table and so on and so forth.
Well, and I'd start clearing them and you'd be like,
because there's going to be a comparison coming up here. But the idea was that sometimes an image is so strong that maybe it should be picked apart on its own. And I thought, okay, let's approach this as what the assignment that I would give a student and say, go to the museum, find something that rocks your world, something that blows your hair back, something that you are passionately in love or passionately hate. The issue was some things to consider when discussing a work of art, how to do it. And so I thought, well, maybe we'll just go through this list that I have, and we're gonna talk about it like we would find this image in the museum. You've got your sheet. You're supposed to fall in love with it, and then I would tell you, and you're going to go, what? I can't draw. And I'd say, you're going to sit here and sketch it for an hour. And they're going to say, but I can't draw. So, well, I can't play clarinet, or I can't, sing the night aria or what have you. So, but if you sketch it.
What aria?
Oh,
that. Nobody, who can? Jesus.
Well, exactly, right? But I can't do that, but I don't care if they're stick figures, because what you have to do is really, really go over every square inch of this image that you're looking at and then start discovering what it was that the artist did to hold you in an image.
Because there's nothing like having to sit with and try and replicate an image to really understand how it's put together.
Exactly. Because how dark is that? Where are those clusters of dark? In the case of printmaking, it's even, sculpture on a level playing field. It's like, how deep did the artist go into the metal? For instance, if we were to go, somebody were to go to Phillips collection and they would fall in love with the Luncheon of the Boating Party. Well, now I still say that Renoir did 2 magnificent paintings, and that's one of them.
I agree.
His brilliant composition, and you really start looking at how he did the faces, and he takes you to the background, and you look at all the feathery strokes and so on and so on.
All right.
But then you realize, okay, there's a reason why that's so great. And then I could always say, don't ever make me look at those big thundering women from the later parts of his career.
All over the Clark Art Institute in Williamstown.
I know, right? It's just too much.
Bruised flesh.
Like the big softballs glued onto,
It's weird.
Bags of.
They're not great.
No, but he's got a rep. So, I mean, so what?
I'm amazed that he still has that rep.
You know
It's
who's
crazy.
underappreciated, I think, is Pissarro. If you really start looking at some of the things he's doing with his compositions, they're astonishing, and his touch is really unique and wonderful. At any rate, that's my point, is that you can find some greatest hit of your own. And the other reason we're going to focus on a single work is sometimes a single work could be worth a ton more than just an hour to sketch. Because once they've sketched that image, then they have to go back home and they write about what they saw. And they can use this sheet that I have as the outline of their paper. And I also tell them that I don't want any plagiarized anything. They have to include a picture of the wall plaque, and they have to include a picture of them with the wall plaque and the piece for scale, so that there's no more, I got it, I was there. No, you weren't. You went online. You didn't see it. Screw you. It's not a research paper, but it's a research paper because you're researching yourself. And you're having to learn why this is a magical image. And if you can't find a magical image, well, why are you alive?
Well,
I mean, come on.
Why are you in this
Anywhere.
field? Right. Well, all right.
Seriously.
Okay.
I mean, so.
But I feel like part of the reason why we're doing this is it's rare to find people who A, take the time, but also B, understand exactly how to dive in. It's tough. People don't get it.
Absolutely. And prints are even more arcane than a wonderful, high contrast, colory, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Thing. So on the sheet, some things to consider, and I in no way say that this is a treatise or anything like that. I just want to give them something to think about. But there are 4 main things that you can attack. They'll always be there. If you didn't know what else to say, you could say subject matter, technique, the movement or the style or ism that it comes from, and something about the composition or a formal analysis. And right there, that'd make up your 1,000 words that you have to turn in, right?
Sure.
Okay.
Would you feel okay if I took a picture of this and put it on in our thing?
I suppose. It's like my name's on it, right? Yeah.
Your name is on it.
You can put a little yellow highlight on it.
Okay. Just want to make sure it's okay.
Yeah, it's fine, sure.
Okay.
As long as you come to every class and don't say, is this on canvas? Or Blackboard, or just show up. You're
kind of an old school teacher there.
And also, no, I won't share my PowerPoints. Come to class.
That's right.
Anyway, I know. Somebody called me a coot the other day.
Coot?
Coot.
You're kidding. You old coot?
You're a coot.
Wow.
It's a residual. Anyway, it's a hard thing to be, closing in on 65 and thinking, oh, look at all my peers are starting to retire, and be there and think I'm not timed out yet. But I still need to
12 in your head.
Right, but also it's imperative to stay current and to not teach the same course over and over and over again, and try and find things that are fascinating, like when they took down the Stonewall Jackson sculpture in the middle of Richmond, and then compare that to Rumors of War, which is just up the street, which is Kendi Wiley's beautiful sculpture. But how do you stay current and make it relevant? And it's hard. Because
it's a lot to keep up with.
Well, it is. And then you also have to keep up with how to speak to the generation today, because, of course, pronouns are a slippery slope. Oh, we didn't do our positionality.
Oh, you're right. Oh, you want to do it?
Sure. My name's True Ludwig. I'm a gay, white, trans man, and I'm happy to be working here with Ann Shafer, who has been with me through thick and thin since before transition.
That's true. Yes, as True D.
Yep.
But interestingly, during that time, I often would call you True.
Yeah.
Actually, I called you, I put a D on it, Trude.
Well, everybody called me Trude. I still refer to myself as Trude. Hey, Trude.
Yeah.
And that's fine. And I told you you should continue to do that because it made you comfortable.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
I'm not going to say, you have to call me Seamus from now on. That's not going to work.
It's been a journey for both of us.
I'm just impressed that you stuck with it.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so you use the pronouns he, him. I use the pronoun
he, her, him, they, them, that. Yes.
Well, yeah, I guess that's the question. Does it really
Sorry,
matter?
I forgot about
really
that.
Matter?
Now you put they. Anytime I'm having to write an email about a student,
You say they.
I oftentimes say they because you can't necessarily know and it's triggering.
Oy.
And triggering is a violation of everything in life. You know, when we were growing up, were you triggered?
Probably, but
You didn't talk about your trauma.
No, the nomenclature is completely different now.
Correct. There was no such thing as a trans man when I was growing up. There was Renee Richards, but she was
That
not.
was about it.
Yeah. So things change over time. And indeed, the concept of even looking at an image such as we're going to finally maybe look at today.
Wait, I'm going to stop you there.
Uh-oh. Will you tell us who you are, Ms. Shafer?
Because you didn't let me talk. My name is Ann Shafer. I'm a cishet white woman, and I use the pronouns she, her. We record this in Baltimore, Maryland, which is the land of the Piscataway Conway people. Okay, proceed.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for pausing.
All right. So, Ann, you had said, why don't we ever talk about composition, or what was it you said? And I said, what do you mean? Like talk about line, shape, form, color, texture, space, unit, rhythm, portion, balance, opposition?
Yeah, I was like, I'm sorry, what did you just say?
Well, if you grew up in Des Moines, Iowa, went to Franklin Junior High School, you had Clifton Rooney, who would say, line, shape, form, color, texture, space. And we, in our family, would bellow those as the elements of art, because art is always going to have line, shape, a form, which is sculpture, is a painting, color, texture, and space. Either how much it takes up or what it depicts. Or we could get even more persnickety and go after the elements, which are obviously always there, like H2O. You talk about the principles, which also help those things stick together, like unity, rhythm, proportion, balance, emphasis, and variety, which, as we all know, Anne, is
the spice of life.
Bing! And then you'd get a gold star for the day, because if you can be funny and keep everyone awake with me for 3 hours in the dark.
No one does it better than you. Those people were trying to fall asleep and they couldn't.
Now, James Wu, there was a time we were standing in a room and he was vertical. And I think he was actually asleep. He was swaying back and forth, and I was so impressed.
Maybe he was dancing. Remember?
No, his eyes were completely. I know he's still Mr. Hot Dance Guy, but not. He had his hand on the table, and his eyes were completely closed, and he was just sort of swaying. And of course, the rule, I am putting it in the syllabus this year: don't yawn in my face.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's just
That's rude.
Rude and demoralizing. So.
Oh, yeah.
Bleh. So, Anne, you're looking at this sheet. You just came into my classroom. It's the first day of class. I say, here, take a look at this sheet. What would you do if somebody handed you a sheet like this?
Well, as a nerdy student person, I would read it.
You put on your reading glasses instead of squinting at it.
Oh, stop.
Nobody can see you. Besides, they're really, I want those glasses.
Oh, these are, my favorites. I would start at the top, assuming that you were going to lead me through this exercise in order, because I know you would do that.
Probably, yeah.
That's right. So number one is the subject matter / content.
It's parenthetically content.
Parenthetically content. And basically, it's the first kind of, let's identify what's going on in the picture.
It's your first conversation with it, yeah.
Right.
And when I say subject matter, and then I'm going to assume you folks are a little bit more advanced. Subject matter can be one thing, but content can be something else.
Oh, yes.
So let's say that it is a landscape, but in that landscape, subject matter would be a landscape, but the content might be that these are the fields, for instance, the hay wain, and what it means about the nostalgia for a way of life of the ages that are going away because the Industrial Revolution is eating up everything around England and the trees are all disappearing. So the lovely little old school wagon trundling through the creek is a lovely evocative thing of a simpler time, and a little boy who's with his dad, and you can hear the water wheel and the quietness of all of these things. The concept of a simpler time when you may actually hear things such as birdsong. So NPR had a story, of course, yesterday about noise pollution and how it's deleterious to our heart rate and everything. It's another one of those inflicted traumas of everyday life that we seem to accept. But how do we get past it? In the Haywain, that painting by Constable, it's cinematic. It takes you to a place and a time, and it's wide enough. It's one of his big 6-footers.
Yeah.
And I always tell my students, if it's bigger than your arm span, then you own them, because your peripheral vision can't even perceive all of it. So you're embodied in this beautiful time, and the way the light skims through the clouds and the fields, and you're...
Yes, gives you a little repose.
Right.
Yeah.
So the content of that, it's not just a landscape, it's really pretty. Like, what's the rest of the story?
Right.
So there's that.
Okay.
So then you can tell them, like, the next question after the subject matter, then what?
Let's see. You can ask yourself all these things like, is it a religious scene, historical, mythological, portrait, landscape? All of the hierarchy, basically, of subject matter that we've talked about in other episodes.
Right.
So you want to put it in a category, some column of art making.
Even for yourself. And the last one, because this is for a modernism class, is abstract. Because it's none of those things, correct?
Right.
And are there symbolic or allegorical meanings implied in it? Well, if you looked at Kandinsky and say, oh, that's the first, non-objective art, purportedly. But are there symbolic meanings? Oh my God, yes. It's totally loaded. But would you know that? No. Would you perceive it? Perhaps. He didn't care if you did. But if you were to go find out more about him, you go, oh, there's the crumbling mountains and it's apocalyptic and so on and so on and so forth.
Yeah. Okay. And then titles. Oh, this is a good one. Does the title of the work provide information toward the meaning? If not, why do you suppose?
Untitled, number 4.
I mean, I don't hate it, but I would rather the title not be necessary to understand the work.
Agree. I agree with that. And sometimes it's just so you can tell it apart from the other things.
Okay.
For instance, in this thing we're going to show you, the title of the work we're going to talk about
It's a guidepost, a little wayfinder. Okay.
It's Battlefield. And in the same way, if we were to come across an image and there were no label next to it, it might be much more honest, because that whole day of the museum, you have to take time. What was that day that you guys had at the BMA where you were supposed to take the time to look at something?
Slow looking?
Yeah, that one. Slow looking. The concept that people will look at the image for 3 seconds, but they'll spend 7 seconds on a stupid label. Take the label away. And that's why when I put my work up on the wall, I never put it up with the prices, because people are going to be looking at the price and not the work. So this is 3. Here's your sheet. You can take that later.
Right.
But so does and for instance, if you were Jackson Pollock, and it is number 4, 1950. It's the 4th one of those paintings he did in 1950, because he liked the neutrality of the numbers, because he didn't want to impose on you what those were. So that, for him, had the use or the non-use of the title was important. He needed
that's its own piece of conceptual.
Correct.
Yeah.
So that can be, and then, of course, the students will say, but is that, it's like, that's something that a curator named it, man with hat and cane,
exactly.
Because it didn't have a title. It came into the museum, but we have to call it something.
Right.
So, or was it named The Bride Stripped Bare by Her Bachelors even?
Yes.
That's Duchamp. Well, what the hell, Marcel? And that's also important, but it's surreal. So how can you know what's important and what's not? Well,
the fascinating tip, as a cataloger, I'm going to geek out on cataloging. Sorry, people. So if you had one drawing come in or a print by Rembrandt, and it was a figure that had a plumed hat, you would call it Man with the Plumed Hat, right? Because he didn't title them. Although somebody did. That's another story. But if you got 400 of these things, then you would say, Man with a hat, facing 3/4 left, eyebrow raised, plumed hat dipping off this side to differentiate it from the 399 others. So when you see a title come across from a museum and it's super specific, it's because the catalogers are trying to differentiate from the 300 others.
Would it be safer to have, do people ever put them in parentheses so that it say untitled, but then is like also known as, or like Night Watch. It's not the Night Watch by Rembrandt, right? It's the Company of Friends, Banningcock, mustering the
Yeah, I think the Matisse paintings at the Baltimore Museum, I forget which one, but I think the blue nude and the pink nude both have other titles, but
Memory of Biskra is the blue one. Now, why was that a Matisse thing?
Memory of Biskra was his title, but it's become known as the blue nude. So on the label, I believe it says the blue nude. Might even say the large blue nude. I'm not sure. And then parentheses what his title had been.
Okay, and then
or maybe vice versa.
And pink nude is
the large reclining nude, but. Right. Well, how many of those are there?
A bazillion.
Right.
And with fabric, without fabric, always without clothes. I mean,
that's another story.
So there's the concept of the titling. So you get that out of the way, because especially with musicians, because they want to know all the, what key signature is that, how, so on and so forth.
Okay.
The next one, does the artwork have a function or purpose?
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, because it's not until pretty modern times that artwork was standing as its own artwork, art for art's sake. And it always had a function prior.
And that's why I put something like altarpiece, tomb sculpture, painting for a private home. And then when I teach modernism, I add created for the artist's pleasure, need, desire, impulse, ethical stance, moral outcry, intellectual edification.
Yeah.
Well, that's what we're going to eventually, maybe, if you're lucky, that's what we would talk about for this particular image.
Yes, we've picked one image to talk about. You'll know what it is
and
in
we're
a
not
moment.
even there yet. But
no.
Okay. All right, and then the last on that, her subject matter.
Was the artwork created for a specific audience or patron? Why or why not?
Exactement.
So that also is a modern, there's a switch in modern times, because generally in the early days, it was either somebody wealthy or the church, basically, and they would dictate what was to appear in the works, or there was some prescription about, the Madonna's in the clouds, whatever.
And my family is depicted in the lower right.
And the donors are here.
And my patron saint is immediately behind me, and it has to have a lot of red because it's got to go with my throne or whatever. So there's that.
Okay. The work of the day that we're going to surround all of these questions with is...
So why did you choose this particular... Now, of course, I know that this is center to my whole being.
Well, I did pick it, didn't I?
Yeah, you did.
Well, I was trying to think of something that...
would be worthwhile to the audience?
Well, yes, certainly worthwhile, but also has this super stark composition that was worth picking apart, and the meaning is so deep and so painful that it just seemed
but
like...
it'd be easy to gloss over, too, because it's so dark.
Yes.
So what did you choose? I suppose you should tell them.
Okay. We for this episode's work of the day, I chose Käthe Kollwitz's Battlefield from 1907.
Heavy. Schlachtfield.
Yes, and so there's an image of it, and you will see it, and you'll say, "Oh yeah, I remember that one."
And we also remember this one because I loved how this would get them. They'd be squirmy. They'd remember James Peterson totally undid him.
Yeah, loved him.
Bass player.
Yes, I remember him.
He still remembers that.
I'm sure.
And it's powerful.
Maybe because you were trying to keep studio students awake for 3 hours, that's where our guideposts / pinnacles of the works would slide into place, because you knew that was one that would hook them.
And to reignite them at a certain point, and just say, okay, here we are. And Käthe Kollwitz, born in 1867, died in 1945. There's a powerful block of time. Käthe is a woman. It's not Cathy.
It's not Cathy. It's Käthe.
Käthe, because there's no much in German.
Right, and the A makes it a long A.
Yeah.
The umlaut, excuse me.
Yeah.
It's not Cathy, it's Käthe.
Please don't say Käthe Kollwitz.
Käthe.
Say Kollwitz because...
Kollwitz. Yeah.
So Käthe Kollwitz, Battlefield. Standing all alone by itself, there's this astonishing image. It's very dark. If you squinted really hard, you'd say, God, it kind of looks like a Rothko with a kind of a dark sun rising off of the horizon. Because it's this whole symphony of darkness.
It is a lot of darkness.
But the opposite part of this is like the dark sun above the horizon and the brightness below the horizon. That's if I'm squinting at it super hard and it's out of focus.
Right.
Okay, but it's Schlachtfeld, battlefield. All right, when was it done? You'd have to tell me what the work is. Sometimes they forget to give me the title or
funny.
somewhere it is. I have to know where it is. In this case, she made it in 1907. This is the version that I pulled up from the Käthe Kollwitz Museum in Cologne. And Anne is the one who has decided, what is it that you say that Käthe is for me?
Your Patronus?
And explain what that means for those who don't know what a Patronus is.
Well, yeah. If you've not ever entered the Harry Potter world, in Harry Potter world, each wizard has a spirit animal, basically, that is kind of designed for them. They don't have a lot of control over what their Patronus ends up being, but it's kind of like their touchstone.
Mm-hmm. It's the thing. It's their talisman. It's the thing that they draw power from. Mm-hmm. And in my case, Käthe Kollwitz, everything about her as a human being and who she meant, and that she'll be an episode unto herself.
It'll probably be longer than one episode.
Oh, well, yeah, I'm afraid to say. But just to simply say that her ethos, when I also put in here ethical stance, moral outcry, intellectual edification, this last line, I could say that that's all of this was Kollwitz, because there's this woman who's married to a doctor living in Berlin, and her husband's a doctor. They could live in a nice place. Nope, chose to live in the poorest part of the city. And she always chose to work with the worker, to depict workers, the hardest part of the end of life, right? And so that was her choice. That was her need, her desire, her impulse. That was her motivation.
What's her calling?
It was absolutely her vocation, not an avocation, a vocation to have been called to do this. And her ethical stance, absolutely. Her moral outcry. There is an intellectual edification piece to this too, because the concept of this all draws from a time period that she and her little brother would go and play out in the backyard, and sort of like kids would go out and play cowboys and Indians. Mm-hmm. Well, these two would go out in the backyard and play like peasants and feudal lord.
You're kidding.
It's an interest. Well, we'll get there.
Like cops and robbers.
Kind of, yeah. But because she believes so deeply in this, and she had done cycles of prints, and this is the second significant cycle that she had done, both of which had taken on subject matter from times when the workers rose up. The first series she'd done was called the Weavers' Rebellion, and that was about a rebellion in the 1840s. This is depicting
but not of her time.
Yeah, neither of these are of her own time. They were so important for what they meant. And the fact that each of these times it was the workers rising up against a complete and utter enslavement by the wealthy classes. And so...
By using a story from history to illustrate current, everyday...
Exactly.
Right.
And that's very good. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So this particular cycle comes from her, it's called Bauernkrieg, the Peasant War cycle. And there's 7 prints in this. This is number 6. And it was a series of etchings that she had done between 1902 and 1908. And they're huge, really. This one, if we look at what Chicago says the plate size is 15 7/8 by 20 3/4 inches. 16 by 21. That's a good size image.
Well, and the sheet is almost 22 by almost 28. Mm-hmm. It's giant.
Now, if I look at the 2 Kollwitz I have hanging in this very room with us, and they're both posthumous restrikes, so don't bother to come and steal them. I don't care. They touched her plates. That's all there is to it. Once you see how big they can be, the outrage is a little larger. The prisoners is a little smaller. I remember when the students would walk in, and some things we would put up. And Anne finally realized you can't just pull them out and put on the table because they're all called squirrel, 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 squirrel. But when it would be revealed, it kind of would suck the air out of the room.
Yes, a little ballet with the tissues.
But when this one came out, people would just fall silent. And then we would put it up onto the rack. It was a killer. When you see it
but it does change when it goes vertical.
God, yeah.
Yeah.
That's essential. And I wish my students would realize that when they're making their work. And that's why I always say they has to be on the wall at 4 o'clock. So when I walk in, I can see what the work is, not what you thought it was when you had it laying down flat in front of you, because they're 2 very different things. Exactly. So there is this dark, powerful moment. Okay. So in this cycle, there are 7 prints. In this case, Kollwitz talking about the Peasants War was essential because she committed to this concept, and the scenes that she created came out in this order. The first one was called Die Pflüge, called plowing. The first scene is these guys pulling a plow like they're oxen. The next one, which I had a very hard, sometimes I couldn't even make it through the next one. It's called Raped. Yeah. There's a woman who's been raped, cast to the side of the road. The next is an older woman who is sharpening the scythe. And it is almost square, and her eyes are so fixed and so angry, and they're like red hot, even though this is all done in a symphony of black. And then the fourth image is called Arming in a Vault. I'm not going to try and say Bewaffnung in einem Gewölbe.
Good job.
Sorry. Arming in a Vault, and it's a vertical. All these others so far, I'm just discovering. See, this is why I teach art history. So the first two are horizontal, as the people are part of the earth. It just squares in on this woman.
Squishing in.
And then all of a sudden it rises up in this arming in a vault, and they're climbing a stair coming out of a tunnel and rising up with all these different kinds of weapons. The fifth is called Lorsbruch, or Outbreak. This is the most famous of them, and it's marvelous. It's a horizontal, but there's this enormous wedge coming in from the right, which is the peasants charging forward. But in the foreground is this angry woman from behind raising her arms as though she were shrieking at them. And she was called Black Anna in those days when the Peasants' Revolt went about in 1525. But it's actually a self-portrait of sorts, too. Kollwitz acknowledged that this was her stance on it. So this outbreak is the peasants rushing forward like a wedge, and they're coming in from the right and headed to the left, which immediately gives you more tension. Because if they were going in the direction that we write, it'd be like, whoo, there goes the water. Right. So, and then after we've got this army in the vault, and then we've got outbreak, the sixth scene is called Battlefield. And that's where we're going to land today. And it's only two individuals that you can make out right at first. In fact, you can't even really tell if they're individuals. Some of them are probably individuals, and because it's literally a battlefield. And the last one is called The Prisoners, and it's it's a horizontal, but it's still boxed in because the prisoners are all behind barbed wire, and it looks all the world like the Holocaust.
Well, it looks like those photographs.
Yeah. But this was done in 1907.
Right.
So, where books are burned, bodies will be burned. It's like she is insisting that you be aware. This is her say his name of her day, right? This is what the workers were enduring in her day. And she's using this from history that, we don't know. Peasants' Revolt of 1520, it was a reaction to a part of the Reformation and the feudal lords getting stronger and stronger, and the peasants being treated as chattel slaves, and they finally rise up. But wait, there's more, because they say that they have a right to be human beings, but they are also oppressed tremendously. In fact, perhaps she got some of her impetus from a play that had been written by, Huldrych Zwingli and Thomas Münchner. It was a whole play about this. The hard part about this is that our boy, Martin Luther contributed to the defeat of the peasants.
Yeah, after he had done all of his other stuff.
Freeing it all up. And It's like he spins on it.
So weird.
Yeah. In part, that was accomplished by the army of the Swabian League. But the people created their own armies. To me, that's just astonishing. And if you think about the unrest in various places in our own day and the riots that occur after something, but here's the reason why they rose up. Some 100,000 peasants were killed in the peasants' uprising. Now, that's 1/7. That's 1/7 of the city of Baltimore.
Right.
It's an enormous number. It's particularly in a world that is, a tenth the size of population that we have. 100,000 peasants were killed. And then, Britannica says, reprisals and increased restrictions discourage further attempts to improve the peasants' plight. Golly, that just sounds like legislation in America, doesn't it? No, you can't vote. That she chose this event and literally put herself in the picture and literally put herself in the shoes of these people. That, to me, means the world.
It's funny because whenever I look at these, and I had forgotten which 7 were in the series, I never think of them as being depictions of that earlier uprising at all. Because
they are so they're
look
timeless
like today.
Right? We never really get to see them in sequence. That's the other problem.
Right.
Because they're so strong, they can stand all by itself. And so we haven't even started talking about the single image here. We're still talking about how the 7 goes together, and I've never really had the opportunity to think about them through the horizontal square, rising up, and then charging back, and then the movement downward in the battlefield, and then this just total blockage of the prisoners.
Right.
She's a movie maker. She's a director. Absolutely. These are absolute, this is where the reels change when you're watching it in a movie house. Mm-hmm. This is 1907. This is all out of her heart and her vision, and with her insanely deft hand. And she, I think by this time, it already was to have won an award for drawing in 1892. But it was stripped. He won a gold medal for her draftsmanship, but it was stripped by Bismarck because women shouldn't be drawing.
As a woman, yeah. But I've always been interested that if I were an artist designing a series of 7 images, I mean, I might change it from horizontal to vertical, but I would have them all being the same size.
Correct.
So this always makes me think that maybe she pulled them together later, but
oh, no.
Right.
I'm sorry.
I agree with you.
Yeah, look at them like this. And the other thing is that if we think of etchings, we're still talking, do they come from a series? That's an offshoot of the subject matter.
Sorry.
But no, but that's
I digress.
No, we don't really, because that's still part of it. If a student went, I got to know more, they'd go into it and they'd find out more. If you don't want to, we'll still talk about the single image. But the other point is that you saw all of the images laid out together. They're not all done in black and white. The version of the battlefield that we had at the BMA had very bluish ink.
Yeah,
it was a midnight greenish blue. And the raped one is brown. Very brown, like leaf litter, like it was the color of leaf. The Prisoners is a kind of a, not a vine black. There's gray in it. And the Outrage that one's just plain brown. Yeah. Which is really something.
Oh, the color switch.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Because, those were to emulate watercolor, right? So now was there artwork created for a specific audience or patron? Well, I think we're getting the idea that in a way, it was created for the workers and because of the workers to inform everyone.
But in 1907, workers would be able to afford these?
No. Right. They might be able to see them, but they're for the workers because as we move into this image with greater care, is that battlefield depicts a woman who has walked through the darkness with a lantern looking for the body of her son. And obviously she's found him. And the lantern illuminates her incredibly worn hand and the face of her son upturned. We're looking at his face upside down. His neck is exposed and his body is immediately facing towards us. So we're looking from his head down. And it's incredibly dark. It's very dark. It's in the dead of night, trying to step through the battlefield. And the one thing I think about this is an incredible premonition in another way, because Käthe Kollwitz would lose one of her sons in the First World War. And I'm sure that, she already makes it to me, I can already feel that preemptive pain. It's so palpable in this image. And she would lose a grandson in the Second World War. And it ended just a few weeks after she'd passed away. She lived through such an astonishingly potent time. So there's that. Audience patron. Well, okay, technique. Let's talk about technique. And that's right. Number 2 on the list.
Okay, so after you've discussed in your paper that you're going to hand in to Professor Ludwig, you have discussed subject matter. Now we're turning to technique. What kind of medium or materials is the artist using?
Oil painting, fresco, mixed media, printmaking, marble or bronze sculpture, found materials. Now those are all listed there because there are people, print lovers, who may not realize that frescoes are going to look different than an oil painting, is going to look different than a tempera painting, that an etching is going to look different than a woodcut, is going to look different than a lithograph, or, a sculpture, blah, blah, blah. Okay. And that also is supposed to open up the possibility that they could actually, another one says architectural structure made of wood, marble, or concrete, because architecture is frozen music. If you wanted to do the museum itself or the room in which the thing was housed, you could do that too, because there you have it. All right, what else?
Why and how did the artist use this media?
Well, Anne, what do you think? Why and how did the artist use the media?
Why? I feel like... So it's an etching. There's some drypoint. There's a lot of aquatint. There's soft ground. And there's some sandpaper for burnishing, apparently. I think that she used etching or intaglio to get the depth of color from the inks, but also so that she could have these lines that kind of differentiate the various bodies on the battlefield and parts of the clothing that the woman is wearing, so that it just gives it a little more, I don't know if it's just guidance because it's so dark.
I think it's also because if you were to go online, and maybe we can put this up for them too, there's another reproduction of it where you can actually see it was taken a slightly more raking light, and you can actually see the buildup of ink from the depths of the line and how deeply they are put into the image. The ink is literally in furrows, or of what comes out of a furrow, these mountains of ink that are created by the depth of her line bite. And the line bite, it creates a sculptural atmosphere, as opposed to just going smudgy, smudgy, smudgy. If you did this scene in charcoal, it'd be a great value study, but it wouldn't have any real punch because it doesn't have, as you say, those lines as a guidepost, as a way in. And because she's such a consummate draftsperson, it gives us an opportunity also to really notice her exquisite sense of, nobody draws hands, but she beats Rembrandt by,
the hands.
Like by 811 bazillion miles, you know?
811 bazillion.
Yeah, I'm doing an extreme close-up in this case where you can look at the technique. Let's talk about the technique from a purely technical level. If you think, oh, it's an etching, it's etching in aquatint, then you'd say, well, the color of the paper should be what's coming through in the brightest spots. Well, yes, it is, but she adapted it from the beginning because she would do a soft ground of either sandpaper or sometimes, I believe in Outbreak, if she'll lay down soft ground, a layer of fabric, roll that through the press. It picks up some of the soft ground and literally bites in, very lightly bites in the texture of this so that it already informs the ground and it warms it up. It already gives an atmosphere, which, you know, it's like toning your paper. For those of us that are learning to draw, it takes some of the fear out of having to draw because you've warmed up the paper and it's not just this big white thing staring at you. You know, like when you start, it was a dark and stormy night. It's already warmed up, you know. And then I'm positive she would have done her line bite. So she would have put hard ground on the plate and done this exquisite drawing. And then she would, in her next process, she would start building the aquatint up in different values and tones. And for her, it would be burnishing, lots and lots of incredible burnishing to bring out even the brightest brights of the hand as it reaches down to the face of the sun and lets us see with the lantern, it illuminates the knuckles, the highest landscapes of her very worn hand, and the jaw and the bottom of the nose and the arc of the brow of the sun, as in S-O-N, and some of the figures beside. Exactly.
I just saw that
exactly.
For the first time.
Go ahead. What did you just see?
Fuck.
If you'd sit and you had to draw it, right?
Yes.
And how many times have we looked at this image together?
Many, and usually upside down, in my defense.
No, I'm not complaining. I'm saying that's the gift of Kollwitz, right? Keep on.
Right. So, but it also makes me want to point out that various impressions of it might have more or less ink so that you can see more easily or less easily what's going on in this sort of dark battlefield itself. So, but right underneath the sun's head, for the first time, there's a forearm and a hand laying across the bottom of the plate mark.
And it's even bigger than, that's a man's hand.
For sure.
And by the scale of it, it lets us see that this was a younger man. In fact, it could be more childlike. And
this must be his shoulder here, and that's his head.
Quite possibly. So, and then if you move over to the right of it, you'll notice there's somebody else lying and another hand, skeletal, which I've never really gotten to notice that much because you're so thunderstruck by this, what is also so difficult but so beautiful. It's a benediction. It's as though this energy is passing from one into another, as though, you know, the hand of the mother is just touching his brow.
Look at it seems like the horizon line behind her looks different than whatever the other impression was we looked at.
So the other thing is that when you first see this, and that's when I want it on the sheet, right? I want it up on the wall so that it rewards scrutiny. Well, the first thing you see is the brightest area of contrast where her hand is touching her son and the lantern. And exactly. Then you realize, I think, after you go to this moment, you're the focal point. Right? Then you start looking around and you realize, oh my God, this is a battlefield. Oh my God, this battlefield. It's not like the ones in the Civil War with a few bodies. This is a pileup of bodies. They're every which way. She's literally had to step over and on maybe and through. And she's gone in and burnished out, for instance, this open mouth of death of a figure that's is to the right of her child. And there's actually this grasping hand, there's a foot behind them, a head, a face, another face, an upper arm. And then you start thinking, wow, 100,000 people died. I mean, I think she knew that it wasn't just one woman, one mom losing one son. This entire field of death is
every son.
Every son, yes.
Sure.
More than one is too much. And
so I just want to make a note that we've been comparing the Art Institute of Chicago impression to the one in Cologne, and the one in Cologne you can really blow up and get a good hard look at this.
Yeah, and of course that's at the Käthe Kollwitz Museum, so of course their documentation should be the best. And I'm actually somewhat proud of myself because I said I'm going to try something new today, so I managed to project this on a bigger TV screen, and it's paying off, isn't it?
It is.
And you realize that I'm computer hostile, so that was a big step.
It was a big step.
So then other things, it's like this dark shape.
Just to the left
skews off into the back, and to me that could be any farm implement, because literally they're an army of people that rose up and created an army with hoes and pitchforks and the tools that they have. It's not like they were armed and funded by the American government. So you have this field of humans that she's had to pick through to get there. And then if we move back, and Anne's point is incredibly well taken about how the manner of the photography in the Kollwitz Museum's version, it lets us really see how the ink piled up. There's another one, ours at the Baltimore Museum had actually a very bluish cast to it.
Yeah.
And that was incredibly effective. So as far as the technique goes, she's a goddess. She's the high priestess, as Carol Wax would say. Carol Wax is the high priestess of Mezzotin.
Correct. Hello, Carol.
Hi, Carol. I hope you're enjoying this. But then you'll also realize things like the very high horizon line, which is, it's only 1/3 of the way down. And in some respects, that's much more like the Dutch artists would do. That's the same kind of high horizon line, off topic, but not really, Anselm Kiefer would use.
Or Hopper sometimes.
Yeah, that it's much more dramatic, skew it up so that we are underground, much like walking down into the Civil Rights Museum where you are consumed by this. We are below the horizon and we're in that field with them, and we are at the level of this dead child of hers. It's a young man. So all of these things. So we've got aquatint. You can see that there's different values, and you can see in the super brightest spots that she's gone back in and burnished them out.
Compositionally, the high horizon line beautifully offsets her bent over back. She's the only thing that pops up over the horizon line, so it's able to offset her, the lighter sky, which is not light. And then it's, as you said earlier, counterbalanced by the bright spot that is shining on the sun's face and her hands in a lantern. So there's this kind of central totem thing that goes on. But when we've been looking at this for years, and for me, like, I knew what it was. I've heard you talk about it. It kills me every time. But yet, every time I looked at it, I was only focused on basically her and her hands.
Right.
I never had ventured beyond that, really.
Correct.
Which is kind of fascinating.
Well, because, we got to get through this museum. We got to get through this print room.
Sure.
And then, okay, and how long did it take?
That sure looks like a self-portrait.
Oh, come on. Of course it does. I mean, she feels this. It feels like a self-portrait completely.
It's amazing, though, because her face is in such darkness that and I've always been fascinated by the fact that it works probably better without you being able to see the grief on her face.
Oh, yeah.
Because then you can imagine it.
Absolutely. Okay, so, it's very much like the universalized faces of the gleaners. But hers is a harvest of death.
Right.
The gleaners get to at least pick up little bits of grain that they can take home and feed their family. They become every person, right?
That's the painting by Millet.
Exactly. So they're below the horizon line, and off on the top was, and I'm sorry I just made that connection, but see, those are the kinds of things that make our history so freaking awesome.
Well, that brings up a great point of the relationships. Yes, the picture can stand on its own, but it's so much richer and informed by its relationship to other paintings.
And because the Millet was the workers, and that was an incendiary piece when he made it in 1857, and it was like
the beginning.
And I always used that because we had an impression of Millet's etching, and it's not nearly as worked as this. It's a schematic, if you will, of the. And I always say, take a look what's on their feet. And there's clogs. I said, well, in French, there's sabots. And the thing that was terrifying about those people is that if the peasants wanted to defeat the world, they're going to pick up their sabots and throw them into the machinery in the factories. That's sabotage. Oh my God, they're going to have power. It's those kinds of links are all the way through it. So she's linking with the realist movement, if you think about it.
Absolutely.
And so what ism? Well, is it German Expressionism? Not really. She has to kind of get squished in there, like with Kirchner and went.
Well, it's just
or
such
Kandinsky,
a different aesthetic.
who's Russian, even though he was German. But she's her own aesthetic. So is she a naturalist? Indeed, she is, because there was that whole brand of playwright theater writing in the 19th century. And Bismarck stripped her frickin' award because it was too naturalistic when she showed her chops at being able to draw so effectively. And
Was that his excuse? It was really just because she was a woman.
Yeah. Yeah, in much the same way they're like, David is too real looking. Well,
right.
Too bad. So we could go with, what ism is it? Well, she's her own ism, if you will. And if you look at her in the scope of her life, these are fairly naturalistic, these two early etching cycles. By the way, it's not that early when you realize that this is when she has totally hit her stride. She's 40 when she makes this. That's not the artwork that a 30-year-old woman would make. And it's maybe not even the work that a 50-year-old woman would make. But it reminds, well, I shouldn't say it here, but at 43, I have a line from her journal up on my wall in my studio. It says, she's 43, I took the note on it. It's like, I've learned to work like a cow as a cow eats and grazes. You go out and you work every day. And that's what she does. And so in this chapter of her life, she's doing etching. And next chapter, into the 20s, after the war, she starts doing woodcut, which is even more highly cinematic in a way. It's totally graphic. And then the very last thing she's doing are transfer lithographs that are like, they're posters. This one is triple thread, right? So.
And sculpture also.
Oh my God, that's right. Oh, because you were so sweet and you pulled out the... I got to go face to, you pulled her out her self-portrait, and I got to sit with her. And
do you happen to know who printed for her?
What a great question. I
assume she didn't print these all herself.
Well, not the ones in my office, not here,
obviously.
Because they're minor posthumous restrikes. And they were printed in Munich after she's dead.
Posthumous restrike is when an artist's prints are printed after they're dead.
Correct. So. And like all of the disasters of war.
All of them.
Yeah. And so, obviously she must have pulled her own initial proofs.
Yeah.
I don't know who was printing them this cycle. That's a great question. And nor have I ever really bothered to look at how popular was it, how well did it sell. But I think, well, there we go. There's some of our homework, right?
There you go.
Now, this is, that's something you might start taking away from when you do your visual analysis for your art history paper. Well, obviously, we're way past 1,000 words already. So.
1908, the Association of Historical Art, Verbindung für historische Kunst, published this cycle together with the art dealer Emil Richter.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Which doesn't still tell us who printed it, but that gets us a little closer.
I think by this point, she had been, if I recall correctly, Richter had kind of discovered her and was shepherding some of her works along. Okay. But I think in one respect, we had been talking about the technique and then making our discoveries because we're talking about ism and style. Well, that's the third point on the sheet, right? Movement, style, era, ism. And so the question is, go ahead and read it.
What artistic movement, era, style, ism, does the artwork appear to be part of? And we talked about naturalism.
So, early Renaissance, Baroque, Impressionism, Expressionism, Cubism, Surrealism. I do the isms to make it more understandable for my students. German Expressionism, it's the closest, but this doesn't use garish colors. It doesn't use hacking, slashing things. But in terms of the intent and the seriousness of it, and in a way, it goes back in time in an apocalyptic sense, much like Kandinsky's work did, looking to the fact that, here we are at the beginning of a new century, but looking at the end times. And, and then what? So
that answers during what historical period was the artwork created? So
1907. Well, the First World War isn't going to blow up for another 7 years in Europe, right? It doesn't mean that some of that isn't happening, and it doesn't mean that there isn't some sort of unrest that we haven't bothered to know about yet in Berlin, which of course reflects everything in our own day.
Right. So how might the historical context affect the appearance of the artwork? So as we discussed, she's living in the poorest part of Berlin and is well versed with the struggle of the people, as it were.
And her husband had actually come up with, her husband, the doctor, had come up with a version of early insurance for some way to be able to help the poor help themselves, which I think is fascinating. And then when I talked about the Millet, I was doing this like I knew what I was doing. How does the artwork compare to treatments of this subject during different eras or by other artists? And so Millet, to me, is even if she'd never seen it, they are kissing cousins, you know, dealing with the same kind of thing. And then at the beginning, I'd said something like, if you soften your eyes, it feels like a Rothko, because it's a symphony in a variety of tones of black/gray, or if there's a hint of blue in the ink. The abstraction of this image and the strip of sky and the strip of the landscape and the blurred edges, those are the kinds of connections I want students to start clicking on. And so if we were to close in on certain spots, for instance, where the earth and sky meet, it's diffuse. It's going off into the mists of early morning and the late at night. Even the edges of the mother herself are soft. They are not a hard outline.
They look like a Seurat drawing.
Very good, yes. And it actually shows the kind of paper that it was printed on, because you can sort of see the warp and the weft of that in this image.
Well, isn't that the softground?
Well, it also shows, if you look really carefully here and there, you can see it. And of course, the paper and the color of the paper were her choice also.
The other thing I just noticed for the first time, when you make a copper plate etching of something, the edges are pretty, you might round the corners, but it's a hard edge. And hers is kind of wafty, floaty up there on the top.
Well, what she does is she's beveled the edges of her plate so it doesn't cut up the paper and blankets, but she always paints a little bit of a margin around it, so it softens the edges of the image, and it's not a hard machine edge. It is a softened edge, and in this case, if we just look at the top edge, you can see the movement of the brush putting the stop out on that edge. And it also softens the edge in a way so that the paper, I'm sure, was not a hard-edged paper. It had the decal all the way around, which... Probably. Hey, that's a huge choice. If the print's going to be floated, Anna and I always talk about when we take our stuff out to our favorite framer, is it to be floated or matted?
I'd be curious. I'm going to have to look and see how many of these sheets are actually deckled, because that seems like a really modern conceit. Like, I don't think she would have ever conceived of these being floated in a frame.
Oh, no. That's not what I meant. In terms of understanding the edges and wanting them to be soft as opposed to hard.
Right.
Like down in the lower right corner by her signature, you can still see
the stop out.
A moment there. And in the bottom, and it's ragged. And I think that helps along with the image,
That was my initial point, which is the varying edge makes it more effective somehow, and I'm not exactly sure why.
Softens it. I think the hard edge means this is the end of it. And when you have a soft edge, it's like a Pollock. It could extend out forever, and it does, because there's a field of bodies she stepped over to find her son. And if you look down here, you can actually see all of these horizontal lines. Those are actually remnants of some of the paper and the fabric that she put in, because it's some of the texture of the paper itself has a personality, right? As opposed to like a Reeves BFK, which is just, machine smooth. God, look at that. You can see in her hand the shininess of that older skin. You can see how the veins on the back. I remember looking at my grandmother's hands when she would play organ, and the way the blood vessels would dance across the tendons, and I was just mesmerized by that.
Her hand, of everything in the image, almost looks photographic.
Yeah.
It's the thing that's in the highest relief, detail, concentration. And
the lantern is just this of light. It's interesting, like it was a TV show. You could see it. It doesn't have hard edges either.
Right.
And you can't even see the framework of it. The other thing, if you notice, where her body goes above the horizon, it's the soft edges. But then Kollwitz uses these vertical lines, literally vertical, drawn, etched in lines that draw us down. It's like rain. It's like the gravitational pull that drags our eye down to the sun. And so the drapery even, her skirt comes down and it even directs us to the sun's face.
Yeah, it's pooling there on his chest.
Yeah. And even the depth of those, and you start realizing that if we were closing even more, and you can when you play with these, you're so lucky. I tell my students they're so lucky to live in an age like this.
Yes.
Because we never even had this kind of time. This is luxuriating, right?
Oh, for sure.
Think about that. So if we wanted to ease in further, just to be able to see that how proud of the surface that ink is in ridges. So the soft, the smooth, the hard edges are all done incredibly knowingly, very intentionally. It's so interesting how that all pools into that almost photographic hand, and then touching this. It's as though the sun he has started to evaporate.
Oh, for sure.
Already.
It looks like a ghost image.
Already, yeah. I just look at that hand that's coming in. It's just, So, yeah, we say naturalism, almost photographic, absolutely. So we've talked about some subject matter / content, a lot of it. I wouldn't expect that in your papers, which they'll be due at the end of the week. The technique, we've talked to you about that. And what ism she is. She is in a land of her own, much like Goya. You could say that he's Rococo at times, he's neoclassical at times. Yeah. And then he does, the romantic aspect of his persona. Some people live outside of it and are just great on their own. And then what's item number 4?
But the people who are outside of any of these things now are falling into the guideposts.
Absolutely. If you think about the guideposts, right?
He was outside.
He violated everything to put the print on its own without the text, right?
Rembrandt.
And then, we move, Claude Milan. Those were all things that blew doors open, right? And it doesn't even have to be the top 10. This isn't even the most famous of the images from this cycle. But I think it's the one that breaks the heart the most.
Oh, it always got me.
Oh, yeah. It's just, it's Vietnam.
Well, exactly. I was just going to say, you always made the point to the students about the dog tags.
Okay, so yes, I did. The idea of continuing to say, you do realize that many of the bodies, let's say, that are being fought in the war now, they're all your age. And in this particular image, we have obviously a variety of ages, but we have a field of bodies. And then the concept of World War I, which was going to be coming up, was this field of death and not knowing who these people were at all. So, for instance, at Verdun, unidentified, right? So at Verdun, there were so many dead, and there was no way of identifying. They literally just scraped so many of those bones into a pile and put them in an ossuary. But the idea of why do we have dog tags? So that at least you don't have to do what this mother is, picking through a field of rotting corpses to find the child that she gave life to and has been taken from her by a whole system. So the dog tags, and I tell them about Verdun and how, your life expectancy on that battlefield was 1 month, and that you can still see the landscape. All it can grow is grass, and it's still pockmarked, 100 years later. And so that the concept of it, it's just, that's really cute. Ew, that's neat. No, it's not neat. It's fucking amazing. There's a whole lifetime in there. And if you invest just the tiniest scrap of your own time in that, you'll find your humanity expanding. That's what she's accomplished in this 1/16 by 20 inch. It's not even huge. For an etching, it's huge. In my mind, it's freaking monumental. It is. It blows up like taking the corners of your screen, and it becomes cinematic. It's larger than an IMAX. How you look at some sculptures and they're so amazing, and then you realize, oh, that's so much smaller than I thought, because it is monumental. That's how she can do a scene.
The other thing that has just struck me is that it could be easy to make an image like this you could gender it pretty easily, right? But what she's done so beautifully is it doesn't swing female mother or boy, man, son. It's both characters in this excruciating death twist that both men and women can equally
because death comes
to
absolute death comes to us all.
Right.
That could be a father picking over, looking for his son as much as anything. This whole time I've been saying son. What's to say it isn't
husband?
It could be her husband. It could be her daughter. It could be.
Oh, and yes.
Because it was the peasants revolted because of our own mindset. It's like, oh, it's all guys and then a couple token girls that have managed to break, through the glass ceiling. But the universality of this to me, and the absolute conviction. This is where I talk about courage of your convictions. You know, what's your manifesto? What matters to you? What are you going to take your time to spend time making? What do you need for others to see? What is it that you need to convey to someone else when you're making your image? You know, if you want it to be non-objective and it's line, shape, color, texture, space, and it's beautiful arrangement and it's balanced and it's pretty, it goes to my sofa, fine. For me, this is doing something. You know, it guts me every time. And this is just one of the cycle of 7.
Right.
So I'm so pleased that you chose this one.
Oh, well. It always makes me think about, well, there's probably more than 2, but what is the purpose of art? Mm-hmm. Right? You talk about this all the time. Puppies and kittens and sailboats versus, you know, Black Lives Matter. I think you and I, and you all probably know which side we drop down on, is that artists have a unique ability to make us think. And if they're using that talent, in my mind, to its fullest, it's to make us think harder, not think softer.
Very well said. That's lovely.
I've never said it that way before. I'm so proud of myself.
Okay, we got to write that. Put that nugget. That goes on the nugget page.
That's the gold nugget of the day.
Well, you know, work smarter, not harder is one way of putting it, but to tell it harder. And in this case, you know, when I said at the beginning, soften your gaze, and it's one thing, and it's just, oh, okay, it's composition. And then if you get insightful, and I hate this term, but if you drill down, or to use the phrase that Anne would use marvelously, which is, you know, inviting scrutiny, if we really take this down to the elemental level, you can see that there is not a single mark that has been made without thought. It doesn't mean that it can't appear spontaneous. In a way, you know, when you're putting down your aquatint, or if you're managing things, some of that can be seasoning. You know, you're just really good and you know what you're using. You know, she's 40. She's been doing etchings for quite a little while now. But to get it to the point where it is fascinating and stunning across the museum, and you see it on the wall, and then you get closer and it's 15 feet, 5 feet, 2 feet, 2 inches, and it delivers at every one of those kinds of moments. And each one of those, it presents you with a different meal of visual information that eventually just goes in and grabs your heart and your mind and your whole being, if the artist is really successful, or if you have a heart or a mind. It's astonishing to me that a piece of paper could be made so potent. This is also a sculptor's drawing.
Sure.
She was a sculptor, and she loved Barlach, the German sculptor Ernst Barlach. And I think that's why the ground heaves and it undulates like it does with those bodies, as opposed to saying, okay, so it's a field that goes back to the horizon, and it's every inch of this has been worked. And yeah, it's not an easy image. And here it is. It's a beautiful Sunday morning in Baltimore in August, and it's not a happy topic. And yeah, sometimes it's okay to look at things. I'm looking at another etching on my wall, which is a bottle brush, which looks like, really surprised. It's just a silly object centered on a page. And I adore it because of its technical mastery. But it's not, and my own overmapping, having it tell a story of looking surprised like a Dr. Seuss character, that's just my reading of it. But that's not going to change history. It's not going to do what Kollwitz does. One of co-teachers, Allegra Marquardt, you know, she's like, you know, when I look at Kollwitz, it just always makes me want to sigh.
Yes.
Yep.
She did her job.
Right. Right. And, you know, she was saying it in a pejorative way, and yeah. and so one other way to think about this ism business is that when we would do History of Prints, bookend this day, and we'd start with Cassatt, a woman of privilege who did, you know, wealthy women and children pouting in nice salons in Paris and taking care of her aged parents from mainline Philadelphia. And then we close the day with Kollwitz. And I am not negating the importance of Cassatt and her fabulous prints, but it didn't exactly make the top 10. To think about what you as a maker are willing to do for your art and with your career or with your life choices, so that it's not just mindlessly bumbling around and, you know, going to Target one day and looking at shit on your phone and not paying attention to what's like the big storm that's going to wallop California, and it's the worst thing of all time, and it's only because of what we did to the planet. You know, there are folks that aren't going to listen to the news, and I understand why they won't. But to me, this is still news of the day. this image made in 1907 that depicts an event from the 1520s. And it is news of now, and that is why this image is just going to continue to survive. And if you say Kollwitz to almost any print person, they'll go,
yes,
Huck, man. I know one woman who, I can tell, she totally channels Käthe Kollwitz's hands. She's a woodcutter, and she does biblical scenes, but it's like, oh, there's a Kollwitz hand, there's a Kollwitz hand. And it's Kollwitz can touch you on so many different levels. We're getting to the last bit, and it really shouldn't take us too long because we've kind of talked about it. But for the students, if they were to use this particular piece of paper, the composition or the formal analysis we can come to last because we've already thought about what it meant and how it was made and what time in history it fits. And then as we start talking about how Kollwitz used these various formal elements, you start realizing, oh, look at the line there. I've already talked about how the line goes and draw those vertical lines take us straight into the figure and how they are overlaid over the diffuse forms of the bodies across the field, and also just how incisive and how absolutely well observed but well seen. There's a difference between observing something and seeing it at that, and I hate this word too, but at the granular level. But
it's like hearing and listening.
Exactly. And you know, even if you have hearing aids, you may not listen. And that's the same thing here, you know. It's you look at it, just look at it, but see what she's doing. So
I think people need to be trained how to look.
Exactly. And this is the goal of some things to consider when discussing a work of art. So composition, how did she deal with line? How did she deal with shape? Well, okay, I'll back out and Anne can say shape.
Well, and the thing that I think was the reason why I was so, when I thought of this one and I thought, oh, this is perfect, because this is a composition that shouldn't work. Something right in the middle. Like
Dead set.
You never are taught, you're taught never to do that. And yet she overcomes all of that.
You do realize that it also forms a cross of sorts, and that he becomes a Christ-like figure. He's martyred. Because if you think about it, the horizon, there's that medium band, and her body becomes the rude, the vertical element. And that becomes a total cross. And then we are, you know, like with a montagna, you're standing at the foot of Christ, it's the dead Christ. In this case, we're looking down towards it, almost in a perspective down the cross, which, yeah, he's martyred.
Yeah.
And it's an individual. It's not just, you know, it's not the corporate 100,000 peasants. And so if you think about those shapes, you know, the strips, those are just rectangles that create, you know, the horizon, and the simplicity. I hate that it's not simplistic.
Right.
That's dense. It's the simplicity of it is alarmingly capable. It's just, it's eerily.
It shouldn't work.
It shouldn't work.
It shouldn't work.
Absolutely. No, but she's the fulcrum of this thing, and then even interrupting it with that dark, the one jagged line going off to the left corner, almost like an orthogonal going back to a vanishing point on the horizon line. Absolutely essential. You know. So the shapes are fairly simple. Again, softening your gaze as opposed to sharpening them and going in with a microscope or a magnifying glass. That she's considered large forms and simple forms, as well as, you know, details. Because students, when you teach life drawing, they only want to draw the details. Just the hands, maybe really, they spend all this time on the face, like, no, where is that on the head? Where is the head in relationship to the body and vertical and so on and so forth? If you think about the things that you see with shape, all right. So in some respects, I on my sheet, I will say, you know, line. Is it contour line? Is it horizontal, diagonal, circular? All of these are like little hints, little, you know, I'm flapping them on the head saying, hey, take this into account. Are the shapes geometric or biomorphic? And I think in this case, there's a little bit of both. In human forms, pose, gesture, volumes, modeling. The answer in this one is, oh yeah. There is pose, gesture, volumes, modeling. How did she come up with this? What did she use as her mnemonic? Were there photographs of bodies in that kind of foreshortening? Is she translating those from having been in a life class? But did she get to look at nude bodies? Probably not, because the academy is whatever. So there's that. Color. Now, this is an interesting one, because what is it that I would always say about black and white? Anne, do you remember?
There's a world of color in black and white.
Exactement. Now, this, you could say, oh, it's color. So, yeah, well, it's just an etching. It's in black and white. Well, okay, go ahead and Google this and look at how many different kinds of impressions there are. I always loved ours because it had that midnight blue in it. But there's some that are brown. There's one out there that is just a terrible posthumous restrike. You can see that the plate is completely degraded, and the
especially in the sky.
Yeah, and the aquatint has worn out terribly. And then I think there are others that were pulled posthumously that they're overwiped. I like to think that she certainly printed her own plates to begin with. Maybe she had a bon tiré and handed it off to Richter. I don't know. But the concept of how the ink colors change is a vital part of this. You know, it's not just black and white. It's a brownish black, it's a blackish black, all of those kinds of things. So there's a world of color in that. How is the color effect? Sorry, go ahead.
Well, but if you believe by making an intaglio print that you're limited to the one shade of black that you happen to choose, for this particular print, because it's nighttime, the lack of color it actually heighten.
Absolutely.
It adds to it.
Because of the unknowingness of this and what you'll stumble across and what you find. And that can add to the pathos, it can add to the terror, the fear of it. Can you imagine being a single individual in the dead of night, stumbling across this field? Hell, you could be cut down by the opposing forces just for being out there. And looking across this, I think of this in incredibly human terms. For this. It is not an illustration. This is an evocation of a really difficult time. And so is the color descriptive or expressive? Well, in the case of this image, yes. How is the color affected by light and by dark? This is a symphony of light and dark. All of those things. What color palette does the artist employ? Is it monochromatic or complementary? Well, so right there, lion-shaped color. Well, Kollwitz is banging the drum hard on that. Okay, what about textures, Anne? Talk to us about textures. Are they descriptive, actual, emotive? Do they include brushwork?
There is definitely brushwork. You can see it primarily around the edges of the composition where she was stopping out those edges. The texture, I was always confused by her use of softground, but I take your point about energizing the background or however she does it. I guess I always wanted it to be aquatint.
Exclusively?
Well, no, I think today I'm going to change my mind and say that that using both for tone helps Kollwitz make it an entire world and flush out the scene and has more options. And
it gives it more volume.
Thank you.
It gives it more dimensionality. It keeps it from being so flat.
Right.
I appreciate the experimental quality of that as well, because she's doing so many different things with these plates. But just the concept of using it as a person who's a draftsperson who could just be in terms of drawing it by itself. Using that texture, using the granulation of the aquatint is another issue. You know, how big, how dark these areas are, the textures that are softened along the horizon line, those kinds of things are there. And is it actual? In the hand, it seems real actual, those textures, you know, those wrinkles, but then emotive, yeah, you know, because wouldn't it be awful if this was in the light of day and there was blood all over those bodies?
Right.
You wouldn't read it anymore. You'd be too shocked to feel the pathos of the scene.
Right.
Okay, what about space, Anne?
Despite it being fairly flat, it is evoking depth for me. It's so masterful because she's on a knife edge of so many different compositional elements. And also like the gender part, like all of the things. Like this one, for me, this one is almost, it's kind of the perfect picture.
Yeah. The perfect wrong picture.
Well, of course.
You know, like a knife edge, and that's the thing. You know, it's like perfectly in tune, and all it takes is to be 2 cents off one direction or the other, and you're out of tune.
Right.
And you know, is she using perspective? She's using aerial perspective, to be sure. It softens as it moves to the background. She doesn't need linear perspective, but she's using it. If you think about the way those bodies are foreshortened, that's craziness, you know?
Right.
Is it illusionistic? Sure. It's all of these things. And it is planar as much as it is volumetric and moving back in space. So again, this is me nudging students to just think a little more deeply. Like if you were a musician, you know, is it, if you played in the same intensity mezzo forte all the time on every single thing, and the meter was exactly the same all the time, it would be so dull. And all of this manipulation, even if it's incredibly subtle, is so bizarrely, marvelously, painfully, gloriously done. You know, like you say, I love that you say it's like it's the perfect wrong picture. The fact that it even had to have to exist is wrong.
Well, there's that too.
But
it's a both and, as you so beautifully captured years and years and years ago for me.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You may have to say something about both and.
You're going to tell them all about the both and when it's both this and that?
Yeah.
Let's pretend you're looking at a stupid, very high contrast drawing. Is it a beautiful young woman wearing a hat, or is it the ugly old hag? That it can be both of these things at the same time, because depending on what your eye is going to pull forward, are you right-brained or are you left-brained? Is this a composition that's all about line, shape, form, color, texture, space? Yes. Is it an evocative, emotional image that has so much depth and content that you forget that she's using all of those basic building blocks?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it can flatten up and it can go back in space.
Absolutely.
Like it does.
In fact, yeah, this is one that would work flat on it. It did. It worked flat on the table as well as it did on the wall. It was still a gut punch, even because if you were the students and you were walking up to the table and it's laying flat on the table, do you realize that you're looking at that martyrdom exactly like she would have been looking at it in the studio? What was the artist? How are they feeling? Where are they looking? Where's their body in proportions as they're making it? That's one thing that none of us really think about, except for Michelangelo bitching about how his neck hurt because he was, painting the ceiling. But that's it too, because it's an extension of the artist, and everything that's here you can see is towards the end of their arm. So the principles we're going to just sort of throw out there because we've actually also alluded to these. Why don't you tell them about the principles, Anne? Tell them what they've won, Johnny.
Okay, so the last bit on the sheet says, how does the artist incorporate the following design principles? Unity, rhythm, proportion, balance, emphasis, and variety.
Well, it all goes together. Nothing's sticking out, right? Like, a blood spatter. Is there a rhythm to this? How does your eye move through it? Is it a fast motion? Is it a quiet, ceremonial time?
For me, for 20 years, it's been stopped by the hand and the lantern. And it was only today, because we slow looked and weren't flipping it in front of some students, that I got past it. And
you started going through the undulations of these bodies melting into the landscape? Because it's a slow, it is. It's
a slow build.
It's a slow build, and it moves back into space, and it tumbles in front of us. I mean, some of the ways, like the Baroque masters, the way they would present Christ on an altarpiece, and his body falls towards the altar, which is the table where his body and his blood will be served during communion. She's offering this up. This is an altarpiece to the peasants. And it's got a ceremonial, quiet, slow time to it. You know, this isn't.
And quiet.
It is, absolutely. It is a hushed thing with this, but with this.
Right.
Underneath, there's a vibration. Yeah. At the base of your shoes, or the soles of your feet. That just, that in itself is electrical.
It's like got the adrenaline of discovery of body. Like she's so on edge, and you can't quite tell if she's just figuring it out that it's her son, or it possibly isn't even her son.
It could be her neighbor's kid.
Right.
It could be, no, not him too.
Right.
Like they're in Hawaii right now, and they're still looking for people. This is that. Because didn't they get the warning? This ridiculous loss of life. It's anything like that, Okay.
Proportion, we've talked about.
It's huge. There's one figure smack dab in the middle, and it's huge. It's plunk, right?
Yep.
But is there hierarchical scale? Where are we taking it? What's your first moment? Where is it that you look first? What does it take you down? Do the bodies then, are they huge, the ones that are laying on the ground? Are we just getting parts and parcels of it? They're smaller forms, but they create a...
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I feel like I started on her hunched over back / head, I think because it's offset, and then it's just straight down to the light. Mm-hmm. I don't think I went to the light first on the first round of looking.
Really?
Well, I don't know.
See, and This is like a fireplace because it's always going to look different each time you look at it. I remember realizing there was never going to be a time when I could hear the second movement of Beethoven's Seventh for the first time.
Right.
And yet somehow with this one, it's new every time. So that doesn't mean that there's a different conductor or orchestra or what have you, but this is new every time. Where is it exhibited? Is it in the darkened hall? Is it in a mat? Are we holding it up?
I feel like all of Kollwitz's work is new and different every time.
Yeah, because it's that layer.
Which may be the mark of a superb artist.
Well, if you think 100 Gilder print, there's such a smorgasbord of delight in there. And it's got, a line shape, form, color, space, rhythm, burst, balance, it's all the variety. Holy, it's there.
Right.
Is this got balanced? God, look at it. It's the scales of life and death. It's almost like she's the center and there's this fulcrum of what we do. It's like a last judgment. It balances in so many ways of the light to the dark.
Yeah.
Emphasis. Focal point. It's always fun to throw something up on the wall and then just ask the musicians, where's your eye going first? What usually draws your eye to something when you very first look at it?
It's usually that it stands out from the rest in some manner.
And that would mean that there's it has some kind of contrast?
It could be brighter, it could be a color. Usually it's probably lighter in my book than a darker.
Yeah. Look to the light, Luke. But I used to say, that first job I had after college where I had to work at a young men's designer clothing store. So it's designer chief. Well, I was thinking about these elements and principles, and I would say when you're walking through a mall, and of course they don't go to malls anymore, so it doesn't hold water anymore. But when you walk through the mall and you look in a store and there are all those mannequins and whatnot, where does your eye go first? What do you look at first? And then they'll usually go, the price. Bullshit. It's the color. This symphony and these quiet colors force you then to go telescope down into that whole universe of life and death right there. I mean, to the proportion of that focal point from the entire print, it's the size of a 50-cent piece.
Right.
And yet it needed, 16 by 20 to make you see that.
And it just occurred to me that this probably could not be made in any other way.
Oh, God, no. Woodcut? No.
Even drawing, painting?
No. A litho, we wouldn't have the depth, what's the word I want? It's the succulence. It's delicious, but it's succulent. It's succulent. It's being able to squeeze it, and then there's just more coming out of this image. Everything else would be too dry. Or painting would be too sloppy, because there's a precision of that moment. How can you have something be so naturalistically drawn and yet be just this, it's like a ripple effect. Golly, that's why you're supposed to spend an hour with an object that blew your doors off in a museum. Is there variety in this? Yes, there's. But so that's some things to consider. So you need, in my class, twice in the semester, you have to go do these visual analyses, and in parentheses on the syllabus, I always call them a love letter. And you have to do 2 of those in a semester. You have to go to a museum, and you have to spend an hour drawing it, which means that you've spent an hour with it. And that's the same way we spent an hour. We didn't have anything to talk about.
We didn't think this would be 45 minutes, did we?
I said this will be good because now this one's been discussed. So if I have to do a Kollwitz episode, we don't spend an this movie.
Yes,
it'll be like,
this is your amuse-bouche for
you
Kollwitz.
Can't have, it'd only be a 7-hour if we talked about each of the prints in the cycle, right?
Right.
This was, it was just.
Well, that's what's so illustrative, that anything that we have nearly anything we have shown you and talked about on the podcast could have gone outward and extended to an hour plus discussion.
And that's the beauty of it too. So how does this image connect to times prior, or treatments of a similar subject prior or into the future? That, where is it in that beautiful march of time? It's just the things that we discovered today, just you and me, because I didn't prepare for this.
I didn't either.
And now, what you guys
secret's out.
But our hearts had prepared us for this, because we've been falling in love with this, and we've never gotten to discuss a single thing. That's why this history of prints class was one thing, and then you put me on this thing, and this terrifying thing, and we've had more fun talking about these things that we love, and it's taught us a ton.
Oh, a ton.
And it's delightful.
It's also firmed up the chronology in my mind so much better than it had been. So I thank you for that.
You're welcome. All you can still see is, it's in that box down that alley.
Exactly.
And it's like, no, take it out of the solder box and don't just think about where it is in the sense of who are we as human beings on this planet.
Right.
So that is some things to consider when discussing a work of brilliance by Käthe Kollwitz, Battlefield, done in 1907. And it is my heart, and it's something that Anne has been really good about being in love with me for a long time.
Well, that wasn't hard.
Well, but does it make you sigh? Only in a good way.
Well, I mean, it's got it all. It's got this very concentrated, simple idea, which is super complicated. Like, it pulses with life and death. This razor edge, it falls one way or the other way, like across the board: composition, meaning, content, conceptual rigor. It's got it all.
We could just call it Mother and Child. That could be its title.
Right.
Does the title give any kind of different meaning to the image? It's like Battlefield. It's Mother and Child.
Yeah.
Put it right up there with the Raphael,
Sure.
Like, where's your God now? It's just, there's so many fronds in these. So that's a thought process, and I don't envy Anne getting to edit this, but you only have to pull up like several different versions of Battlefield for people to look
Well,
at.
that's good. Yeah. So, yes, you'll see all of the images, and you'll see the guide sheet that we use to talk through this so that you can...
Don't give it away. It's just for you guys, okay? That's my intellectual property. But you can look at it because I want you all to enjoy it.
If you feel like...
hush, hush, hush.
All right.
I think.
Well, you think about it, and we can...
It's pretty damn good. I've been tuning it for 31 years.
Well, there you go.
I mean, Gardner will say, these are the parts of art. And I'm like, just take this sheet with you. Your paper's written. You should have it with you in your wallet every day of your life. Thanks for letting us have some fun on this little satellite greatest hits tour. Send us your requests. We'll run them up the flagpole and see what we can do.
Okay, yeah. Tell us what your favorites are.
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
And don't be mean. Just hey, listen, you can always introduce us to new stuff. we have had our opinions. You can always make us understand why it's important to you.
Well, sure. That's another thing. It's so personal. What attracts me or True to something, it's going to be very different from what attracts you. So
absolutely,
everyone is entitled to their own tastes and desires.
And we can ignore or extol or enjoy what it is that you put. We'll love it because you're there. Thanks for being there.
Okay.
We're done. Happy
Okay.
End of podcast episode.
Thanks, Drew. Hey everyone, it's Anne. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Platemark. I hope you enjoyed our conversation on that single work of art, Kollwitz's Battlefield from 1907. It's a stunner, and I think it's just about the most perfect print in history. Oh boy, those are big words. Thanks as always to True for being the SME, and a thank you to Michael Diamond for the use of his original music, and one to Dan Fury of Extension Audio for being my sound person. Also, a special thank you to Lee Turner of Whole Editions and to Skip Barnhart of Georgetown University for sharing with me all of those wonderful printmaking studio sounds that I put together at the beginning of my new opener. Thank you, Lee and Skip. Also, if you value the fine content that we're producing here at Platemark, please consider going over to the website, platemarkpodcast.com, and hitting the support and donate button. Become a monthly subscriber at $5 a month, or you can do a one-time donation of your choosing. But it's a lot of work, and it's just me, and I'd really appreciate it. Okay, I think that's it. We'll see you next time.